Have you ever wondered where French people really came from? If we could travel back in time, would we find French people living in France 15,000 years ago? The answer might surprise you. The first people who lived in the land we now call France were not called French at all. In fact, France did not even exist yet. Over thousands of years, different groups of people arrived, lived together, started families, and slowly became one people. Each group left behind a small piece of its DNA. Like adding one ingredient after another into a recipe, these ancient people helped create the French people we know today. In this video, we are going on an incredible journey through time. We will meet the very first hunter-gatherers who survived in the wild. We will discover the farmers who changed everything. We will meet the horse riders who traveled across huge grasslands. We will learn about the Gauls, the Romans, and the Franks who gave France its name. By the end of this journey, you will understand the amazing story hidden inside the DNA of the French people. So, are you ready? Then let's travel back thousands of years and meet the very first people who called this beautiful land their home. Chapter 1. The very first people in France. Imagine you could travel back in time, not 100 years, not 1,000 years, but about 15,000 years ago. If you looked around, you would not see France as we know it today. There were no houses. There were no schools. There were no cars. There were no cities like Paris. The land was wild. Thick forests covered many places. Rivers flowed freely. Huge animals walked across the land. People had to survive in nature every single day. The first people who lived in this land were called hunter-gatherers. Do you know why they were called that? It is because they did two important things. They hunted animals for meat. They gathered fruits, berries, nuts, roots, and other plants to eat. They did not have farms yet. They did not grow food. They did not keep cows, sheep, or chickens. Every meal had to be found in nature. Life was not easy. Sometimes they found plenty of food. Sometimes they found almost nothing. That meant they had to keep moving from one place to another to find fresh food and clean water. Instead of living in one village forever, they traveled with their families. They made simple camps wherever they found a good place to stay for a while. Their homes were very different from ours. Some slept inside caves. Others built small shelters from wood, animal skin, and branches. These shelters protected them from cold weather, rain, and wild animals. They worked together every day. Some adults hunted large animals such as deer and wild horses. Others collected berries, mushrooms, eggs, and edible plants. Everyone had a job because working together helped the whole group survive. The children learned by watching the adults. They did not have classrooms or books. Instead, they learned how to make tools, start fires, track animals, and stay safe in the wild. They were very clever. They made sharp tools from stone, wood, and animal bones. These tools helped them hunt, cut meat, make clothes, and build shelters. Even though they lived a very long time ago, they were just as human as we are today. They laughed. They loved their families. They cared for their children. They helped one another during difficult times. Over thousands of years, these hunter-gatherers became the very first people whose DNA would be passed down to future generations living in France. Today, scientists have studied the bones of these ancient people. They discovered that modern French people still carry some of their DNA. It is not the biggest part, but it is still there. About 10 to 20% of the DNA of modern French people comes from these very first hunter-gatherers. That means if you could meet a person living in France today, a small part of their family's story would reach all the way back to these brave people who survived in the forests and valleys thousands of years ago. And this is only the beginning of the story. Soon, a completely different group of people would arrive. They would bring something that would change life forever. Instead of searching for food every day, they would learn how to grow it. Chapter 2. The farmers who changed everything. Thousands of years passed. The hunter-gatherers were still living across the land that would one day become France. They knew how to hunt. They knew how to fish. They knew where to find berries, nuts, and plants. They understood nature very well. But then, something amazing happened. A new group of people began a long journey. These people did not come from France. They came from a place far to the southeast called Anatolia. Today, that land is part of the country of Turkey. These travelers were very different from the hunter-gatherers. Instead of searching for food every day, they knew how to grow it. They planted seeds in the ground. Months later, those seeds became food. This was something the people living in France had never seen before. The farmers also kept animals. They raised sheep, they looked after goats, they cared for cows, some kept pigs. Instead of chasing wild animals across forests, they could now raise many of the animals close to their homes. This made life much easier. The farmers did not have to move from place to place all the time. They could stay in one place for many years. Slowly, they built villages. The villages became larger. Families lived close together. Children grew up in the same homes. People could make better tools because they did not spend every day searching for food. Some learned how to make beautiful pots from clay. Others learned how to weave clothes. Some became skilled builders. Life began to change in ways no one had imagined before. At first, the hunter-gatherers and the farmers were different. They lived in different ways. But over many generations, they became friends, traded with one another, and started families together. Their children carried the DNA of both groups. Little by little, the two groups became one people. This mixing did not happen in just 1 year. It did not even happen in 100 years. It took thousands of years. As more farming families arrived, farming spread across almost all of France. Soon, growing food became the normal way of life. Scientists today have discovered this story by studying ancient bones and ancient DNA. When they compared the DNA of those first farmers with the DNA of people living in France today, they found something incredible. The first farmers left the biggest mark of all. Today, about 50 to 65% of the DNA of modern French people comes from these farming families. That means more than half of the average French person's family story can be traced back to these people who planted the first fields, built the first farming villages, and cared for animals thousands of years ago. Can you imagine how important they were? Without them, France might have looked completely different today. There might have been no farms, no villages, no towns, and maybe no great cities many thousands of years later. But the story was still not finished. Another group of people was already beginning a journey. They rode across huge grasslands with their animals. They traveled farther than almost anyone before them. And when they reached Europe, they would change the people, the languages, and the history of France once again. Chapter 3. The Horse Riders from the Great Grasslands. Many more years passed. The farming villages became bigger. Children were born. Families grew. Life seemed peaceful. But far away from France, another group of people was getting ready for a journey that would change Europe forever. These people did not live in forests. They did not live in farming villages. They lived on huge open grasslands called the steppe. The steppe stretched for hundreds and hundreds of miles. It reached across parts of what are now Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. There were very few trees. Instead, there was open land as far as the eye could see. The people who lived there became excellent horse riders. Their horses helped them travel much faster than most people living at that time. They also used wagons with wooden wheels to carry their families and belongings. Because they could travel long distances, they explored places that many people had never seen before. Around 4,500 years ago, some of these steppe families began moving west into Europe. Little by little, they reached many different lands. Some settled in Germany, some settled in Spain, some settled in Britain, and many settled in the land that would one day become France. When they arrived, they did not replace the people already living there. Instead, they met the farming families. Over many generations, they became neighbors. They traded, they worked together, and many started families together. Their children carried the DNA of both groups. This is why modern French people are not descended from only one group. They are descendants of many different groups who mixed together over thousands of years. The steppe people also brought new ideas. They were skilled at working with metal. They made stronger tools and better weapons. These tools helped people build, farm, and protect their families. Many scientists also believe these travelers helped spread the early Indo-European languages across much of Europe. That is a big name, but the idea is simple. Long ago, people spoke many different languages. As the steppe people moved into new lands, their language mixed with the languages already being spoken. Over thousands of years, these languages slowly changed. They eventually became many of the languages spoken in Europe today: French, English, Spanish, German, Italian, and many others all belong to this very large language family. This does not mean the steppe people spoke French. French did not exist yet. It would take thousands more years before the French language was born. But the steppe people helped begin the long language journey that would one day lead to French. Scientists have learned all of this by studying ancient DNA found in very old skeletons. When they compare those ancient bones with the DNA of people living in France today, they see a clear connection. Today, about 20 to 35% of the DNA of modern French people comes from these ancient steppe people. Now think about everything we have learned so far. First came the hunter-gatherers. Then came the farmers from Anatolia. Next came the horse riders from the steppe. These three groups mixed together over many centuries. Together, they became the ancestors of almost everyone living in France. But they were still not called French. Not yet. Another important chapter was about to begin. A brave people known as the Gauls would soon spread across the land. Many people think the Gauls appeared out of nowhere, but the truth is much more interesting. The Gauls were the children and grandchildren of the people we have already met. Their story is the next piece of the puzzle. Chapter 4. Meet the Gauls. By now, the land that would one day become France had changed a lot. The first hunter-gatherers had lived there for thousands of years. Then the farmers from Anatolia arrived and built villages. Later, the horse riders from the Great Steppe came and mixed with the farming families. Generation after generation, these people became one. Then, about 2,500 years ago, a new chapter began. The people living across much of the land became known as the Gauls. Many people think the Gauls came from another country. That is not true. The Gauls were not completely new people. They were mostly the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the hunter-gatherers, the farmers, and the steppe people who had already been living there for thousands of years. Think of it like making a fruit smoothie. First, you add bananas, then strawberries, then blueberries. After you blend them together, you cannot separate them anymore. The smoothie becomes one drink. That is what happened to the people living in ancient France. The different groups mixed together for so many years that they became one people. Those people became the Gauls. The Gauls belonged to a larger family of people called the Celts. Celts lived in many parts of Europe, including places that are now France, Belgium, Switzerland, Austria, Britain, and Ireland. Even though they shared many customs, they were not one big country. Instead, they lived in many different tribes. Each tribe had its own leaders. Some tribes were friends. Others fought each other. The Gauls were skilled farmers. They grew wheat and other crops. They raised cows, sheep, pigs, and horses. They were also talented metal workers. They made beautiful jewelry from gold. They made strong swords and shields from iron. Some of their tools were among the best in Europe at the time. The Gauls were also excellent traders. They traded food, metal, pottery, salt, and many other goods with people living far away. Because of this, some Gaulish towns became busy places filled with merchants from different lands. The Gauls loved their families. Parents cared for their children. Children learned important skills from their parents. Many families worked together on farms or in workshops. The Gauls also respected nature. They believed that forests, rivers, and springs were special places. Some of their religious leaders were called Druids. The Druids taught lessons, settled disagreements, and led important ceremonies. Very little of what they taught was written down because they believed knowledge should be remembered, not written. That is why historians are still learning about them today. If you walked through Gaul 2,500 years ago, you would hear people speaking the Gaulish language. It was a Celtic language. It sounded very different from modern French. In fact, if a person from ancient Gaul met someone from France today, they would not understand each other's words. French had not been invented yet. Even though the Gauls were clever and hardworking, they were divided into many tribes. They did not have one king ruling everyone. Sometimes the tribes helped one another. Sometimes they fought against each other. This would become a very important problem. Far to the south, another powerful civilization was growing stronger every year. It had huge cities. It had well-trained soldiers. It built roads across its empire. Its people spoke Latin. It was called Rome. Before long, the Romans would march into Gaul. Their arrival would change the language, culture, and history of France forever. But even after the Romans came, the Gauls did not disappear. They mixed with the Romans. just as their ancestors had mixed with the farmers and the steppe people before them. That is why the DNA of modern French people still carries the story of the Gauls today. The Gauls were not the beginning of the French people. They were the next chapter in a story that had already been unfolding for thousands of years. And now, another great change was about to begin. Chapter 5. When the Romans came. The Gauls had lived across the land for many years. They built farms. They made beautiful jewelry. They traded with other people. Many tribes became rich and powerful. But one problem never really went away. The Gauls were divided into many tribes. Each tribe had its own leaders. Sometimes the tribes worked together. Sometimes they fought one another. Far to the south, another great power was growing. It was called Rome. Rome began as a small city in Italy. Over hundreds of years, it became one of the biggest empires the world had ever seen. The Romans had powerful armies. They built strong roads. They built bridges that crossed rivers. They built large cities with markets, baths, and theaters. Wherever they went, they took their ideas with them. About 2,000 years ago, the Romans turned their attention to Gaul. Their most famous general was a man named Julius Caesar. He wanted Rome to control Gaul. So, he marched into the land with thousands of trained soldiers. The fighting lasted for many years. Some Gaulish tribes fought bravely against the Romans. One great leader stood above all the others. His name was Vercingetorix. He tried to bring many of the Gaulish tribes together. He knew that if the tribes stayed divided, it would be much easier for Rome to win. For a while, his plan worked. Many tribes joined him. They fought hard against the Roman army. But in the end, Rome was stronger. After a long struggle, Vercingetorix surrendered to Julius Caesar. Rome had won. But something very interesting happened next. The Romans did not force all the Gauls to leave. And the Gauls did not disappear. Instead, the two peoples lived together. Many Romans settled in Gaul. Many Gauls learned Roman ways. Over time, they became neighbors. They became friends. Many married each other and raised children together. Those children carried the DNA of both the Gauls and the Romans. This is another reason why modern French people have DNA from many different groups. The Romans also changed daily life. They built long, straight roads that connected towns. Travel became easier. Trade became faster. New cities grew bigger than ever before. The Romans built stone houses, temples, bridges, and large public buildings. Some of these buildings are still standing today, even after nearly 2,000 years. The Romans also brought their language. They spoke Latin. At first, many Gauls continued speaking the Gaulish language. But little by little, more people learned Latin. Parents taught it to their children. Children grew up speaking more Latin than Gaulish. After many hundreds of years, Latin slowly changed. It mixed with local words and new ways of speaking. Eventually, it became the French language we know today. So when someone speaks French today, they are using a language that began with Latin, not Gaulish. That is one of Rome's greatest gifts to France. Scientists also know that some Romans settled permanently in Gaul. Because they married local people, a small amount of Roman DNA became part of the population. Most of the DNA of modern French people still comes from the hunter-gatherers, the early farmers, and the steppe people. But the Romans added another layer to the story. Their biggest gift was not their DNA. It was their language, their roads, their cities, and their way of building a country. By the time Roman rule ended, Gaul had changed forever. But another surprise was waiting. New groups from the north were beginning to move into the land. One of those groups would become so important that the country would one day be named after them. They were called the Franks. Their story is the next chapter in the amazing journey of French DNA. Chapter 6. The Franks give France its name. After the Roman Empire became weaker, new groups of people began moving into Gaul. One of the most important groups was called the Franks. The Franks came from lands north and east of Gaul, in parts of what are now Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. At first, they arrived as small groups. Later, they became powerful rulers. Instead of forcing everyone to leave, the Franks settled among the people already living there. They married local families and became part of the growing population. One famous Frankish king was Clovis I. Around 1,500 years ago, he united many Frankish tribes and created a strong kingdom. His rule marked the beginning of a new chapter in French history. Over time, the land once called Gaul became known as the land of the Franks. That is where the name France comes from. The Franks added a small amount of DNA to the people already living there, especially in northern France. But their biggest gift was not their DNA. They gave the country its name. So when people say they are French today, they are speaking the name of a people who helped shape the nation's history many centuries ago. Chapter 7. The French DNA Recipe. Now we know the amazing story of how the French people came to be. It did not happen in one day. It did not happen in 100 years. It took thousands and thousands of years. First came the hunter-gatherers. They were the very first people to live in the land that is now France. Then came the farmers from Anatolia. They taught people how to grow crops, raise animals, and build villages. Next came the steppe people. They brought new ideas, new skills, and became part of the growing population. Many years later, these groups had mixed together so completely that they became the Gauls, the people who lived across most of ancient France. Then the Romans arrived. They built roads, cities, and brought the Latin language, which slowly changed into French. After that came the Franks. They became powerful rulers, and the country was eventually named after them. So, if modern France were a giant family tree, its roots would come from many different people. That is why scientists say there is no single French DNA. Instead, French DNA is like a beautiful recipe made from many ancient families who lived, worked, and grew together over thousands of years. And that is what makes the story of the French people so special. Conclusion. What an amazing journey. We traveled back more than 15,000 years to discover where the people of France really came from. We met the first hunter-gatherers who survived in the wild. We watched the first farmers arrive and change life forever. We learned about the horse riders from the great steppe, the brave Gauls, the powerful Romans, and the Franks who gave France its name. Together, all of these people became part of the story of modern France. So the next time you hear someone say they are French, remember this. Their family story is not just about one group of people. It is the story of many different groups who lived, learned, worked, and built a future together over thousands of years. History is like a giant puzzle. Every generation adds another piece, and when all the pieces come together, they tell an incredible story. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps our channel grow and lets us know you want more videos like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into history, DNA, and the amazing stories of people from around the world. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which part of the French story surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.